Okay, welcome all, and thank you for having us for this workshop. I will open my slide presentation and then we will start this workshop by introducing ourselves. So we are delighted to be here and to speak a little bit about the principles and practice of collaborative research. And in a moment, we will explain what we mean by that. It's all about working with patient representatives, specifically in the context of scientific research. So who are we? Let me start introducing myself. My name is Maarten and Judith. I have a rheumatic condition, psoriatic arthritis, and I don't have a medical background. So that means I have, a long time ago, studied social sciences. And in 2014, I did my thesis about the topic of patient involvement in rheumatology research. And the main part of that study was about looking at the impact of patient research partner involvement in outcome research, very specifically in OMERACT. Judith, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Judith. I have spondyloarthritis, and I'm also not a person with medical training. I'm an economist. My main job is director of SCQM, an abbreviation that nobody can remember, but it's called Swiss Clinical Quality Management of Rheumatic Diseases. So it's the National Registry for Inflammatory Rheumatic Diseases. And parallel to that, I founded with a couple of friends a foundation called Rheumacora, explicitly with the wish to support and advocate for patient-centered research in rheumatic diseases in Switzerland at the moment. So that's me.
Thank you, Judith. So how will this workshop look like? The first hour, you will be listening to me, and we will do a couple of exercises together. We will have an introduction on what is actually collaborative research. And then we decided to specifically focus on the question that many researchers have. How can you identify the right patient for the right project? We strive to have a break halfway. And then after the break, Judith will continue and she will specifically focus on how do you start collaboration in practice. She will bring a lot of tips, tricks and tips about how to involve. And by doing that, she will also introduce what we have called the engagement matrix. And then finally, she will also tell a little bit more as a researcher how to create a safe and welcoming environment for patients. I think that we have found out that that's a very important facilitator of successful collaboration. And then at the end of the meeting, we will have time for some Q&A. So if you have questions, I think the best way is to put them in the chat. And Yuka will also follow the chat and she will notify us if it's really something that we have to explain immediately or address. Otherwise, you can also, or we will keep them to the end. So let's start with looking at the description of what we mean by collaborative research. Well, patient involvement in research is something that nowadays aligns with the focus on patient-centered care. So we all strive for patient-centered care, and patient involvement is a critical factor and component of that. We expect that patient involvement will increase the relevance of research and make research more addressing patient priorities and patient needs. And there are many ways patients can be involved in research, and there are also various levels of involvement. It is our belief that involvement is possible actually in all stages of the research process. So really meaning right from the start, from the inception phase till the end, where it comes to evaluating or analyzing data, but also when it comes to dissemination of results and helping the implementation. And patients can also contribute in different roles or different functions. So they can be representatives on behalf of a patient organization, but they can also act as consultants. We speak about patient as partners, and we will use the abbreviation PRPs, which stands for Patient Research Partners, the most used term in the field of rheumatology. And each role has also a kind of increasing influence on the research, and we will explain that also in a minute. Just also to highlight in advance that there is growing evidence that involving patients is beneficial for the research. And I think there are many publications in which PPI, which stands for patient and public involvement, demonstrate all kinds of examples how collaborations benefit from that involvement. It leads to improved relevance of research to patient priorities. It leads to improved study recruitment and retention, specifically, of course, also in clinical trials and clinical research. Improved credibility of the research findings. And that has also a little bit to do that if you involve patients, the chance that the results really fits and addresses the needs of daily practice of patients is bigger. It leads to improved dissemination of research findings, improved translation of research findings into practice. Think also about improved implementation of the research findings. And in a way, patients can also take on the role of knowledge brokers. And finally, it also leads to improved trust in health research and even in the healthcare system. And these are only a couple of advances for the research, but we didn't sum up. But you definitely should believe that it also brings benefits for the patients themselves, the patients who are involved, but also for the individual researchers. So as said, we believe that patients involved in research can be involved in every stage of research. And there are many figures, like the one that you see now, that gives examples of what kind of involvement and benefits there are. And here you can see it's really right from the start, in the preconception phase, thinking about the design of a study, that you try to identify what are the research gaps, that you also involve patients in priority setting, and also involve them in raising funds for the research. When it comes to the study design, you see all kinds of different aspects that patients can advise on and help you. And just as an example, patients can help choosing the right outcomes that should be involved in the study. Study conduct, normally a phase where we expect patients to make a step back. However, of course, also patients can help in recruiting participants for a study. They can give advice on what the best recruitment strategy should be. And they can sometimes also help in data collection and also at the end interpreting the data and the findings. And that's what you see here, the analysis phase. They can have a look whether the data has been collected as it should be. And they also can help interpreting the findings and give their views on what is surprising, what are the things that they had expected, what is confirming their own hypothesis. So there are good examples where patients provide additional benefit in that phase. And then finally, also in the phase of writing the findings up, developing the scientific manuscripts, patients can become co-authors, but they can also help in developing lay summaries and helping to implement and bring that information into the world of patients that at the end of the day should benefit from that new knowledge. There are different ways how the patient perspective can be obtained. And actually, there are two ways. One way is consultation, and the other way is collaboration. And I will try to explain both of them. Consultation actually means generating patient-based evidence. So this is all about gathering information about patient experiences, their perceptions, needs, or attitudes about their care and health. This is actually what we have done for quite a long time, and we have developed a lot of different methods and approaches to achieve that. So think about qualitative research, more quantitative research approaches, but of course also mixed methods studies that will give more insights in the world of patients. All these strategies or methods are formally regulated. And what I mean with that is that there are laws that if you do this kind of research, you have to comply with. You need informed consent. Patients have the right to withdraw at any moment. They are protected. Their privacy should be protected, and so on. So this is a method, consultation method, that we use very well. These methods are all validated. But it's good to see that it actually is also one-way communication. So the flow of information goes from the patients to the researcher. And it's not that the patients influence the study in terms of having influence on the design, the way the study is conducted, or the way that findings are disseminated. And that is the case if we go to have a look at collaboration. Because collaboration, and sometimes also called co-production or co-design, although these are also very approaches, but I take them together here. That is more about the role of patients as research partners. And we define a PRP as a person who have lived experience of a disease and who partner with researchers to inform what research is being done and how it is done. So PRPs share knowledge from their lived experiences, but they also speak on behalf of other patients, and they contribute to all aspects of the research process. So it's not a single moment that they are consulted. They participate from the start till the end, so in every stage, and also as equal partners in the research team. So it's a kind of participation on a collective level. They have influence on the design and the conduct of the research, and This approach is all based on dialogue between patients and researchers and building partnership relations. So collaboration is also very much about shared decision-making in doing research. And opposite of what I just told you about the consultation, this is not something that is formalized in any way. There are no rules, there are no laws, and every institute and every patient organization and even every person involved, they have to find out how they want to put this in practice. So having a look at the different roles that patients can have, we have made this picture, and you see above is the participant, and that we mean is the study participant who fills in informed consent to be a partner in the study. This is not what we mean by patient involvement, because that actually starts when we look at the other roles, being an informant, being an advisor. Patients can take on the role as a reviewer, so a reviewer of research grant applications. More and more institutes are starting to use patients as reviewer. Patient research partner, the role that I just described as equal partner in a team. And then you have the final role of patients as a commissioner. So patients, and in practice, in most time, this is a patient organization, can take the initiative to start doing research and define their own research questions. They raise their own funds. They see that there is a research gap or a gap in knowledge that researchers are not taking up. So they start doing their own research. They become the owner of the research results, and therefore also are responsible for disseminating and making sure that the new information is used in practice. There are not many examples, to be honest. If you look at the examples, you will find them in the field of rare diseases. But I think it might be that in the future there will be more examples where patient organizations take a more leading role in conducting research. So what is typical for this circle is, of course, that if you go through the circle, there is an increasing amount of influence. And just a couple of comments. Every patient role that you see here is essential in the conduct of high quality scientific research. So it's not that higher or further in the circle is better than being a participant or a respondent. And each role also requires a different degree of commitment and time investment. The further you come in the circle, the more time consuming the task will be. And then finally, for some patient representatives, this figure also stands for a kind of learning curve. So the different steps that you have to go through before you can really become a confident and competent patient research partner. So maybe just have a short break asking, are there any burning questions so far? And if not, then I will continue. Judith, I see you have your hand raised.
I was wondering whether you think that The collaboration will be regulated at some point. Is it just because it's so new? Or do you think that there's a sort of wish to leave everything very free and flexible in the same way that consultation is regulated?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, what I know is that now HTA organizations, and specifically also the regulatory agencies, they are becoming more requiring more patient involvement and also describing the role of involvement of patient research partners. So it is in some contexts becoming mandatory also for getting funding. But I don't think that becoming mandatory is also the same as being regulated with rules and things like that. I don't think we are there yet. No. But it would be interesting to have a look at that in a period of 5 or 10 years, whether there are some more set recommendations or even requirements for PRP involvement. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to my second question. And this is about how to identify the right patient for the right project. As being what I would say about myself, a PPI expert, but also advisor, I meet quite a lot of researchers who ask me, who should I ask? Where do I find the right patient? And of course, the counter question is always, yeah, it depends. And what do you mean with the right patients? So with a couple of others, we have thought about, can we give some and develop some guidance for the recruitment and selection of patients for different research projects? And we have written this in this paper. If it's well, it has been sent in advance to you. So some people may have had a look at the paper. And what we did here is focusing on how to match the needs of researchers for particular patient contributions. And this is all focused on examples and our own experiences in the field of rheumatology. And to explain this in a little bit more detail, I introduce 4 vignettes to you, 4 persons who are in different stages of their disease. And so they have different expertises and competences. And they differ for the extent that they have experience with symptoms, whether they have or not already a personal disease story, whether they are able to be active on a collective level, and whether they have experience in doing research. So let's have a look at them in a little bit more detail. The first person is Christine. She's 62 years old, and she has just learned that she has a chronic illness. She doesn't know yet what that means for her daily life. She doesn't know anyone else with her illness, and she's very anxious for the future. So this means that she has lived that we could call something like the authentic and naive, in a non-judgmental way, personal lived experience. The second person, William, is 68, and he was diagnosed with a chronic illness 2 years ago. That means that he can articulate his own illness story well. He hardly knows anyone else with his condition, but he has obtained information about his disease and about all the different treatment options. We would then say that he has articulated recent personal experience, also called experiential knowledge, and he has a willingness to share these experiences with others. So in fact, he is able to tell a personal story about his journey so far. The third person is Anouk. She's 43 and she has lived with her chronic condition for over 5 years. She has learned to adjust her life to it, and she meets many other patients in her own Facebook group. She has become aware of the heterogeneity of the patient perspective, and she is able to share her own insights, opinions, and experiences. But she can also articulate what she has heard from fellow patients. So she has a collective articulated experience, and here we could use the term experiential expertise, which is more than only having experiential knowledge. And she is aware of the heterogeneity of the patient perspective, and she has insights into patients' needs and preferences. Finally, Samira, who is 34 years, and she has been living with a chronic illness almost all her life. She is a board member of a patient association, and she speaks with many other patients, as well as with health professionals. She can share her own experiences and the collective experiences of other patients. She has taken a basic course about research as a patient representative. So she has a collective articulated experience, the experiential expertise that I also just mentioned of Anouk. But the difference is that she also has some knowledge on research and how to bring in the patient perspective. She is in fact a patient research partner. So these are the four persons with all that different knowledge and expertise and experiences. So now I would like to invite you to think about the following questions. We haven't been able to make a kind of voting thing here, but maybe you can use the chat to give your answer. So the question is the following. Imagine that you are doing a study and you want to know whether your research proposal is relevant to the target patient population. So who would you ask to help you answer that question? Is it Christine? Is it William? Is it Anouk or Samira? There's no right or wrong answer, but I will show you the results, some that I believe are better than others. So take 10 seconds to address this question. Okay. Well, there seems to be a little bit of consensus that Samira is a good candidate, as is Anouk. Somebody thinks that also Christine might be asked for this question. My belief is that indeed Anouk and Samira do have the most knowledge on the target audience. So on a collective level, they know what are the needs and problems that people suffer with in daily practice. So whether a research proposal is relevant, I think could be best asked to Anouk or Samira. Let's have a look at another question. You are starting to and thinking about applying a new study. You have drafted the patient information form, but you want to know whether it is sufficiently patient-centered and it's understandable for the target audience. So is it understandable written? And then, of course, the same question is, who would you ask that question? And you can use the chat again. The blocks were animated, but I see that the animation has gone. No problem. I see that there is a lot of people who think, in fact, you can ask all of them. I would say that you probably can best ask this question to Christine or William. Christine, because he hasn't had any experience yet, and she is not aware of any medical terms and concepts that are used in the research. If you look to Anouk and Samira, who are probably very experienced, they know what lives among the group that they represent, but actually they probably are too knowledgeable to really look from a naive perspective to a lay text that a patient information form should be. And it's a little bit the same for me that researchers should never ask me to read a patient information form, because I will not see the things that might be difficult to understand for other patients who do have less knowledge about rheumatology, research, and so forth. So my idea would be to ask it to Christine and William, because they are probably also most representative for the target population of the study. But I'm happy to listen to other opinions. I can stop for a moment. Is there anyone else who would like to argue or say why the other two could also be approached? No?
I think Judith already mentioned something in the chat.
Okay.
She agrees with Maarten. Anouk and Samira are too knowledgeable. They wouldn't be much better than you. Yeah, Judith, maybe
Yeah,
you can.
I mean, it's really striking. As you become more expert, you become less expert in some areas. So, reading patient forms that naive new people should understand, I don't see the stumbling blocks anymore, in my view.
Yeah. If people would ask me, I would probably ask my wife, or even someone, my neighbor or my sister, to read the text, because they can be more open look at such information. Are you in for another example? I hope so, because I prepared 4. So what's the impact of living with a particular rheumatic disease on daily life? Who should you ask? You can again use the chat function. I give you a couple of seconds. Well, it looks like many people agree that this question can best be asked to William and Anouk. I think Christine is just diagnosed and she's very anxious for the future. So she really don't know how her disease is going to affect her daily life. She can say what the diagnosis does with her and how that has impacted her. But really what it means living with a particular rheumatic disease, I don't think she is able to answer at that stage. Samira has the disease all her life. She has adjusted to this. She has found her way. She probably knows how to self-management. So I still believe that William, um, he is definitely able to talk about his experiences because he doesn't know many others. It will really be his own experiences. And Anouk is also able to speak a little bit more on behalf of others. So her perspective of the patient perspective is a little bit broader. But still, also because she has this Facebook group, she is able to voice, give voice to what patients tell and experience about their lives. So finally, and this is the last question, you are wondering which outcome measures should you include in your study, and you want to have some patient advice here. Who to ask? Yeah, great. I think most of you say Samira, and I agree. I think it should be Samira. She knows a little bit about research. Asking Christine or even asking William, you first have to explain what an outcome is. And that's not easy. That's what I found out if you do outcome research and the experience within NetwOArk, talking about selecting core outcomes. It's very hard for patients to understand the meaning of an outcome and to see the difference between an outcome and an outcome measure. While Anouk and definitely Samira, they probably know what an outcome is, how research is being done, and what the importance is of of an outcome. And in addition to that, they know what kind of outcomes are important from the perspective of patients. So they know what matters to patients, and they can advise on which outcomes should be measured. And Samira might even give some examples about good measures to use in a study. So with this, I think I've come to the end of what I had prepared. We are a little bit before time, so I think we have time for some questions or discussions, and we break. Has this been helpful? Does this give you any insights in how you, as a researcher, when you want to try to involve patients and you want to include the patient perspective in your study, the things are that you have to think about? Or are there still any questions? I see Visa.
Yeah, thank you very much for the excellent presentations, Maarten. Actually, we are planning to organize a training school in cartilage engineering, and our aim is to invite patients to this training school. So my perspective was to include as patients as a full-time participants, observer throughout the training school, because this is a new technology and I want them to listen, and at the very end I would like to ask their comments on how they feel or what they think about this training school. So what would you recommend? How should I continue with my patients? Shall I prepare a form? They should fill it up, or shall they write it just directly on a paper without any questions? Or I don't know what your recommendation will be. Maarten dropped out.
Yeah, I can see that he is frozen. I'm not
frozen,
sure. Yes. Oh, he dropped out. He will come in. Maybe later.
Okay.
But
He's going
maybe
to prepare an answer for you, Faisal.
yeah, I think so. But Judith, maybe you can say something about it.
Judith can mention her experience. How should I do that?
Yeah, I can say something till Maarten comes back. I didn't quite understand. You want patients to be part of the course as a participant, or you want patients to be contributing to the teaching, or both?
Yeah, thank you. But actually, this is a highly specialized area.
Yeah, so yeah,
a sub-branch of tissue engineering. So I'm not so sure how patients will feel about that, because it's more research and clinical practice, but some is in the field, like we can apply it on our patients. So I really don't know how I should integrate my patients into this training school. So your advice or opinion is pretty important.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first that you already say you don't know is maybe an indication that you could have, in the way that I was speaking in Plovdiv, that you could involve patients at some level in the teaching team, just to kind of break it down and keep reminding people that it's about people and not engineering in the final instance. And if you involve patients in the training, it's a lot to do with the things I'll be talking about afterwards. A bit making a welcoming environment and making structures that enable the the patients to participate. And one of the things would be very simple, writing a glossary of terms, probably, having some basic explaining. I mean, you could also ask the people participating, if they're clinically active, to try and explain what's going on in a language that patient understands, because there are often theories, if you can't explain something in a one-pager, it's probably, or in a simple, even the most complex things can be explained. The great physicist Feynman took a great pride in explaining complicated things in very simple ways. So that would be one way to involve. But in terms of real practical terms, Maarten's your expert on that. But I don't know, is he back in again yet? Okay, so let's give him.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't know what happened, but I think my connection broke. Probably talked too much. I think, Judith, you did give some answers and suggestions.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, my answer would indeed be to help the patients to prepare for the meeting, and send some information before, maybe even set up a short meeting to discuss what they can expect, and maybe even already at that stage introduce the form so that they are not overwhelmed by the questions that and maybe they have other questions that they would like to ask. Yeah. I see that there is also, let's take two other questions and then we will have the break. Mr. Runhaar.
Yeah, thanks, Maarten, for your talk. Sorry, I can't get the camera to work, so you have to do it without the face. But thanks for your presentation. I think it's a very, very clear and thoughtful way to match the background and expertise level of the patients to the question at hand. I think it was very insightful, and I wondered whether that would also be your advice to any of these researchers, to always think about the expertise of your patients and actually use these examples, or whether you have other categories as well to sort of stratify the patients that you ask for participating in your study.
I think Maarten is frozen again. Hopefully he will be back very shortly.
I can put the question in the chat. Maybe you can answer it later on.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do, I think. Yes, he's gone again. So Ali, is your question also to Maarten?
Yeah, I guess I could ask Judith. Thank you. This has been really interesting, and these examples are very helpful. At the beginning of the workshop, Maarten mentioned it's about finding the right patient for the right scenario, and clearly some of these individuals are suitable to answer certain questions, but not all of the questions. When it comes to the lived experience, I was under the impression, perhaps incorrectly, that the lived experience can be considered at all levels of scientific inquiry, from hypothesis generation to see if whatever treatment, intervention, or device you're trying to develop or invent is suitable for that. But now it's clear to me that, patients who's had the lived experience can only tell their side of the story and not put it into the context, the broader context of how they see themselves in the research and development landscape, and how they can help us understand their condition better so we can develop better treatments for them. So I think the targeting is really important, and I think that could be one of the key points that we get across as one of the learnings of this workshop.
I'll be going into it a little bit more detail in the second half, but I think it is important. And one comment on the sort of the there's also a question of resources. It would be nice to ask everybody everything, but we will have resource constraints, both project costs, but also patients who get asked everything. Hopefully, patient research partners have got enough to do. So there's also the question. So it's not, it's often not practical to ask everyone. You don't have the resources to process it, and also it's about empowerment as well. No? And if you give people with less experience the chance to show what they know, they often know an awful lot, but they need to learn to transmit that, to communicate that with researchers, and then they build up expertise. So we're building up strength in patient involvement.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So let's just have a break of like 4 minutes and then start again at 3 o'clock. Is that okay for everybody? Okay.
I think so. We said five past in our schedule, but we can start early.
10 to 3, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. There you are again.
Good. Should we try? Maarten's back too.
Yes.
Should we try if my things?
I don't know what happened, but I had a bad connection and it broke twice. So I had to start up again. And this is my other laptop.
Okay. So you missed one question. And that was, would your advice to us researchers be to always stratify our patient partners to match the right person to the right task? Is Maarten still there?
Maybe he has to turn off his...
Yes, that's might sometimes be in
his video.
Yes.
That will help. Can we quickly see if my thing works?
Yes, of course.
Because it fell out in the middle. So now if I share... So
there's some people back. Not sure if everybody's back. Maarten is coming in again.
Good on him.
I think we go on. So not sure if everybody's there because a lot of cameras are out. Yes, Maarten is there. And Thomas is there. And Alison. So let's just start.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so welcome back from your break. And the second half of the meeting, we're going to talk about how to start a collaboration. So how to do it. And also talk about some of the difficulties that you might encounter and how to make it possible for the patients to be the best they can be, which is by creating a safe and welcoming environment. So we looked before the break, we looked at the different roles for patients in scientific research. And as you remember, we had the participant that's just a study in the study, but the different forms of consultation, a respondent, an advisor, and then moving towards collaboration, a reviewer, and a patient research partner. And the way, if you want to involve patients, is the idea is to take the different roles that you have available to you and match them with your needs in the research project. So if we look at your needs in a research project, it can be defined, as you know, in a research cycle. And you've surely all seen this before. Some of the cycles have 5 steps, and this one has got 8 from the Oxford Biomedical Research Centre. We start with prioritization. That's deciding what is the question we want to research. Then you have to design the study, You need to get it financed. You start with recruitment and conduct the study. You analyze the results and interpret them, disseminate the study, publish it, and more. Hopefully, it gets to the clinic and is implemented. And this is the special thing. The last point, evaluation, is the thing that is special about the Oxford model and that I like, because I think in this new phase of integrating patients into research, it would be really important to evaluate the research contribution of patients, both from the viewpoint of the patients and also how did it work, how did it not work, for the researchers and clinicians and all the other stakeholders, because we're on a learning curve, and there'll be lessons to learn from everything you do. So we put these two things together and we make the engagement matrix, combining the different patient roles and the research stages. And the way it looks is like this. You can put along the horizontal axis, you can put the different types of patients. And on the vertical axis, you can put that cycle or whatever research cycle you decide upon, depending on your project. And if you match them, voila, there is your engagement matrix. And so you go through quite systematically, and I've got here the questions that we want to ask, the prioritization. Well, we'll see later, but one option is that you ask your collaborating patient research partner to address that issue. On the design, you could maybe have some advice also from a respondent who has a much more naive perspective. You might get inputs from them next to your research team, of course. Obviously, when you're making a grant, one person to ask could be your reviewer, who has criteria to appraise and evaluate if the patient involvement has been well presented and is plausible, and so on. All through the steps, you choose who would be the best person to do this. And if we go a bit deeper into this idea, I've made this matrix with specific texts. So depending on the project, I think asking the right question is something that's very, very rarely addressed by patients. The priority setting very, very rarely happens with patient involvement. Patients come in later to help with recruiting or help whether a formula is well written or the plain language summary. But actually, it would be a real strength for your project to involve patients right from the start. But of course, as we talked before, you can't ask every patient the same questions. So, for instance, if it's relevant for your research question, you ask the naive person with new diagnosis what her questions were before and at diagnosis. And someone who has a bit more experience, I've taken here two advisors. I've left out the reviewer because I think it's more interesting to look at two advisors that have a different level of knowledge. So you could ask one, what questions do you have about your condition? And then the more advanced advisor could be asked about what the primary outcome, what's the most important thing to a patient that we should be finding out. And the partner, who is a integrated member of a research team, can also discuss about primary and secondary outcomes. If you look at the design, maybe the advisor who has less experience could test an online questionnaire. But the partner, of course, is fully participating in the study design. The more experienced advisor can give you advice about whether the grant is credible with a PPI, or whether it might sound to your financing, your funder might sound a bit like not really engaged. When you're recruiting, very useful to have a very naive person giving feedback on the recruitment flyer. And a more advanced person might be willing to make a statement in a short film that you're using for recruitment. The partner is involved in all the steps I won't go into great detail there. Analyzing and interpreting. Someone who's not a full member of the group, of the research team, but can still give useful advice would be the advisor. When you disseminate it and you want people in a doctor's practice to understand it, of course, probably the best person would be the naive beginner. Can they understand the plain language information explaining about this study? But the partner or maybe a superior advisor can also take the dissemination through their networks and to patient associations, can present at conferences and should be acknowledged as an author if they've contributed according to the understood guidelines for authorship. Implementation, the same. There tends to be more people with greater networks involved in patient associations. And finally, evaluation. So everybody can give their view of how was the work involving patients, how was the experience. I think that's also a good way to find closure in a project to evaluate. So that is quite a quick summary. You can see, I think it was on the slide before. I'm going to go back. No, where was it? Somewhere. There is some references I've got about on one of the slides about how you can use some sources. There are metrics out there online. It's on one of the slides before, quoted with two websites that you can look at. That was quite a quick section that we talked about. If there's no questions, I'd go on to the next one. Okay, so very important to create a safe and welcoming environment, because you want the patients who are contributing to be the best they could possibly be. And if they don't feel comfortable, they will not speak when they would have something to say, and they may drop out, and it won't be such a rewarding experience for either party. And researchers can do a huge amount to make that work. So I like this cartoon, two clinicians, and one of them is really worried the patients know more about their diseases than me. I need a faster modem, high-speed internet access to beat them. And this is a feeling that I've felt before, sort of the feeling like, well, yes, you can join in, but you better not know more than I do. So, and at some level, and I've had arguments at conferences about this, at some level, I do know more than any clinician can, because I live 24/7 with my disease, and I know how I feel in the morning, and nobody in the world knows how I feel in the morning except me. But of course, we need to work together, and we need clinicians and researchers to translate my naive feelings into diagnoses or treatment recommendations. And this is what you're trying to get when you talk to patients. So this fear that patients are afraid of being an equal, afraid of a level playing field, because they're afraid of this kind of power imbalance that is at some levels very important, because the clinician knows things I don't, and I need that knowledge to be well and to live a good life. So yeah, anyway, that's the psychology, my interpretation. The biggest errors, and it's simple, but it's not easy. And Dawn Richards, who is also an arthritis patient, has written a nice paper with other people, probably Maarten as well, I'm not sure. Lots of people contributed to this paper. There's like 4 errors, and we'll look at the negative side first, and then look at it, turn it around to positive side. So don't do it. I know you if you need a grant, but not tokenism, because it's a loss for everybody. There's often an unconscious bias towards patient partners. You sort of believe in it, but you don't actually think that patients can really contribute and are really as good as they might be. And to be honest with yourself and analyze that. I think it's something that is very understandable, and of course it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy if you believe it. Patient partners often do need support, and a different sort of support than a fully integrated researcher in a team or a clinician in an institution. And I'll go into that in more detail, but it's both physical and psychological support. And you have to recognize that there are differences. And one of the main ones is the vulnerability of the relationship between patient and clinician, or patient and research, which you are trying to overcome in a research context. And that's quite a challenge. And in her paper, she's got a beautiful slide explaining these different things and how you can react to it, which I won't go into detail here, but I'll go into detail of one thing. And this is the second one, the unconscious bias towards patient partners, because it sort of raises the question, like, what is expertise and what is evidence? And how do we negotiate that, navigate that without kind of devaluing the experience or the evidence of one party? And it's a nice example with knees and osteoarthritis. So here are two knees, and on the left-hand knee you see a nice space between the femur and the tibia, and it's a healthy knee, right? Even I can see that the other knee, the bone is rubbing against the bone, and this knee has osteoarthritis, and so we assume the person on the right will have pain and the person on the left won't. But as you all know, evidence is not easy, and there is a poor relationship between those structural abnormalities and symptoms. And it's been researched, and population-based studies show that 30 to 40% of individuals, which is, I think, is quite extraordinary, who have, according to Kelger and Lawrence, grade 3 or grade 4 radiographic osteoarthritis have no symptoms. They're fine, you know, if we go into the population. But 10% of individuals with severe pain have a knee like the left-hand one, normal, looks healthy. And this is not explained by psychological factors. And therapies, as we all know, are not always appropriate. Painkillers often don't help, and we're beginning to understand that. And we surely all know people who had a knee replacement and they still had the same pain after the operation. And for me, that's the thing that you have to be aware of. This is evidence. What is the evidence? Is it the clinical, or is it the patient saying they've got pain? And these are areas where I think it requires a lot of probably practice and reflection to see that there are fundamental difference in perceptions, and this can lead to different understandings of what evidence is. But it's not always true that the evidence of the patient is not sort of science or not serious. So patients, have something to say, and I think these two slides are a way of showing that. So let's get to some tips for patient collaboration, and this addresses some of the things that Reza was asking before, and other questions. The first thing, really the bottom line, is show that you value the collaboration. I believe that if you're employing, you need to cover expenses for sure, and you need to remunerate patients, because a lot of them, if I'm working in a clinical study, I'm the only one in the room that's not in my working time in the meetings. And there has to be some way of overcoming that problem. It's a real problem. At least many patients have been chronically ill and have lost out on their professional development path, and not doing such good jobs or working full time as they were. Chronically ill people, I'm sure there's been studies, are not as well off as a similar population group that doesn't have a chronic disease. So you need to think about remuneration when you plan your project. Time constraints, traveling distances. You're at a research center, but the patients have to travel there, meeting times, length of meetings in planning. It's important. An example, in the pandemic, I was invited to a research meeting from 3 to 5. And I wrote and I said, hey, that means I have to travel home in a pandemic as a vulnerable person taking immune suppressants in a very full train at 5 o'clock. Could we do the meeting at 1 till 3? Sure, no problem, could do it. And this is not something that you immediately think of if you're not a patient, a vulnerable person. Perhaps easier, obviously, patients may have seating, traveling, or dietary needs, sensory difficulties, need to cater for that, particularly in osteoarthritis. You may be inviting people who have very, very restricted mobility and need taxis and so on. And health issues may come up. You have to be flexible, unfortunately. And our experience in projects we've done is that you don't plan for the whole 4 years. You plan the broad project, but you plan the next contributions in smaller portions, so that it's kind of if someone has to drop out or the demands are too great and they won't be able to do the whole study, you have some contingencies also planned. Make efforts to make them feel comfortable in the team, to make them feel part of the team. It's a big difference to be a patient in an existing research team. If you've got a group of patients, this is for you, Reza, thinking when you invite them, your researchers may all know each other, or at least have heard of each other because of papers they've published or whatever. You can look up their CVs. But if you invite a group of patients, they've probably never met and they have no idea of each other, and they won't be able to work effectively in the team until they've kind of bonded a bit. So if you've got a group of patients, invite them to a kickoff meeting so they get to know each other. There also might be some mentoring from those who are more experienced to the people that are new to working in research. Introduce them properly to the research team. You'd be amazed, but this doesn't always happen. Just have the first meeting and off we go. And you feel as a patient, you feel very lost if you don't know, like, who are the big guys and who are the little guys and who is who. Write a glossary of key technical terms and abbreviations because you use them. You know, Kellgren Lawrence, whoop, and you've lost me already if I don't know what that means. And make sure that there are plain language summaries for any key texts. Often you'll have to do one anyway, and of course your patients can check them. So, offer training opportunities if you can. Maybe you would like to send them to a U-Party training, but also if a patient is in a research team and it's quite a big thing, it might be that this gets into the press, and the press would be very interested in talking to the patient in the research team. And if your patient hasn't got some media training, you might have some problems. So make sure that see what they'd like to learn, but also think about what you need from your patients. Invite your patient PRPs, but all patient representatives. I've written PRPs, but really I mean throughout the thing, to conferences. It'd be a real, even if they don't know much about it and they don't understand all the language, it'll be a real thrill for them to come to a conference and see what this world is, and they will learn things. But you can also have them on podiums and speakers, the patient voice. Ensure transparent, open communication. Make a written agreement to think about it together. What are the involvement conditions? What do you need? What are the sort of terms of reference? It could be a really helpful tool for everybody down the road, particularly in a longer project that takes a couple of years. Oop. Ensure that patients' independence is protected. That's perhaps more relevant in industry, but it can also be relevant in a translational project or something where there's a lot of interests around in the air. And going back to my knees, they have a different perspective, a different understanding, which may challenge your understanding of clinical evidence. Yeah, there's lots and lots of places where you can find this kind of information. And I liked one which actually is related to patient involvement in the development, regulation, and safe use of medicines. Chapter 3, you can find it online. I thought that was quite a succinct sort of checklist of guiding principles for patient collaboration. But there's lots of other things too. And to conclude, reach for the stars, because there's a lot in it. There's a lot in it for everybody. And I just love this. I love this quote. This has changed how I practice medicine. It has changed my understanding of what it means to listen to patients. Take that into the clinic. Just imagine. Change the language I use when I speak with them. And it has changed my vision of how to deliver the care we give them. It has made it our vision. And that is a quote from a James Lind Alliance project, about rare inherited anemias, which she wrote. And I think it's just great. And this is what it's about. So reach for the stars. So that's my presentation. We have a little summary. Are you still around? Are you online, Maarten?
We're still there, and Maarten is also there, yes.
Okay, so Maarten, you were going to do the first things, the first 3, and I'll finish with the last 3.
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that there are different roles for patients to play in scientific research. And they all have their own characteristics and different levels of influence. But what it means is also that not only patients should be aware of that and realize that there is a choice for them, so they can choose which role they would like to play in research. But the other way around is also, of course, that researchers can indicate what kind of patients you want to involve in your study. Are you really looking for a patient research partner with all the consequences and implications that has? Or are you just looking for a patient advisor that you can consult every now and then? Both are justified as long as you are clear what you are looking for. And it also, if you are aware of that, it also helps you to avoid confusion about mutual expectations. So if you are able to express what you are looking for, then you can also communicate that to patients. And second, and Judith, can you go to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Different patient roles. That's actually what I already said. So there is something to choose, both for you and for patients. And then finally, I think that's also something. And in addition to Judith, to your engagement matrix, you saw that there was this hand up in every phase. There was one. But in larger projects, you can also think about having patients in different roles in the same phase, so that you combine different levels of involvement. So in a qualitative study, you can have a focus group meeting, which means that you are using consultation methods, but combine them with the collaboration with patients to help you develop that focus group, that they can think about what are the right questions that we should ask. Do you want me as a patient with some experience in leading groups help moderating the focus groups? Can I help with the reporting of the focus group outcomes? So you combine the different steps, and the rationale for that is that the patient research partners only do not guarantee the representativity of your study. The representativity of the outcomes come from the larger number of patients that you involve in your study. So if you combine different levels and methods of patient involvement, that will definitely contribute to more valid and more profound findings that you can present in your papers. I think these are my summary bullets.
Okay. So you saw the engagement matrix is a good tool to clarify expectations, formulate a strategy of patient involvement, and to analyze the participation process. So there's several examples out there, and I recommend one from the Netherlands. But it's a good easy way with a simple procedure to follow to implement. And of course, the very important point that Maarten just made about combining strategies is also possible. So if you want to benefit from the knowledge of patient research representatives, they need to feel welcome and safe in a team. Otherwise, it's very intimidating to change from that role of patient-doctor relationship into trying to have a level playing field with a different level, similar levels of power or same levels of power. And to do that, you need to make them feel welcome and safe. And finally, to encourage you, remember that phrase, reach for the stars. The rewards are high if you can manage to get patients on board for both sides. And perhaps as a final reflection, talking with people who are long-term cancer patients, for instance, it's also to be involved and to be able to make something with a purpose and with a meaning out of your illness is, for someone who's chronically ill, on a personal level, also a tremendously helpful part of disease management and managing your life generally. So the rewards are high for patients, but also if you can improve your recruiting, if you can improve the analysis, if you can improve, find the right question that you need to ask in a study because you've involved patients, the rewards are high. Thank you. That's my final word. And now we would have the question and answer session. And this is our very final word from Maarten and me.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Are there any questions still for Maarten and Judith? Lisa?
Yes, simply can we somehow or maybe receive these presentations so we can have a look at them, because we want to definitely involve patients. But as you know, as an orthopedic surgeon, we just talk 3 words. It's fracture, arthritis, operation, nothing else. It takes only 30 seconds.
We will upload this presentation. It's all recorded, so we will upload it to the website of NetwOArk.
Actually, I checked the forum section of the website, and it says you cannot register. So
okay,
the forum of the NetwOArk EU link does not work.
Okay, so that's another discussion. I will send you I will send you things about that, but we will put it into the it will be put onto the
Thank you.
website. Yes. Ali?
Thank you, Judith, and thank you, Maarten. That was a very insightful and educational experience for us. Just a quick comment for Faiza. Your query about the website can go to Chris. Chris is taking care of the website and he talks to the web site manager and designer for that, a guy based in the UK. Maarten, just imagine what we could have achieved if we had managed to persuade, for example, ORC to be more patient involved when you came to speak to the president then back in May 2019. I guess it's a challenge to persuade a research-focused organization to embrace patient centricity. And I think it's ongoing work. And I think you probably know this cost action was created because those initiatives hadn't borne fruit. So thanks to colleagues at the Dutch Arthritis Society for making this happen, NetwOArk happen, because there is more than one way to skin a cat.
No, I'm happy to see that things are developing. And I'm fully aware that also different patient audiences have different needs. And I think we need to be very aware of the fact that OA patients are really different from people with inflammatory conditions who might often be much younger. If you look at psoriasis, PSA, or people with spondylitis, they are more in working conditions, but are more experienced also, and sometimes better organized. Also on European level, they have their patient-specific organizations, which all helps in setting up collaborative partnerships. And I think that's a little bit harder for the osteoarthritis community. OA patients, as far as I know, on European level, are less well organized. I even don't know whether there is an European OA patient organization that works for the interest of all OA patients. The point is, what I have seen, for instance, in people with Sjögren, that when they had their first EU-funded consortium and a collaborative study, which was called Harmonics, one of the results that came out was that the patients involved in that consortium started Sjögren Europe. So they started their own patient alliance on a European level. So having this kind of collaborative relationships could also support the establishment of this kind of patient networks. So maybe also that's also an idea for future international OA projects, that they could think about how can we make the gathering of patients sustainable and durable in a kind of European network.
Thank you.
There's still a question from Jay Ronha in the chat for Maarten, if we've got time.
Can you read it for me, Judith?
Yeah. Would you advise us researchers to always stratify our patient partners to match the right person to the right task? If yes, would you use those categories you just described, or would there be more or other categories of importance? P.S. Thanks for a great talk.
Yeah, thanks for a great question. I think that is indeed interesting. The four roles are vignettes. They are imaginary persons. And you cannot cut it exactly the way that we presented them. So you have to use common sense. But if you want to involve patients really as collaborative partner in a research team, you might consider having a talk with a potential patient in advance before you definitely agree. It really needs a kind of support and endorsement of both to start collaborating in a research project. I have seen projects where patients were asked to be involved without any form of selection or introduction. And sometimes that ended up in very frustrating relationship. I've seen an RA patient who was invited to join a orthopedic task force on hip replacement for people with OA. And you can imagine that that person was very lonely and didn't feel very committed to the project at the end of the day because she didn't identify with the research questions. I've also seen very preclinical research projects where patients were invited to contribute but not prepared. So they didn't understand anything, which even might be unethical to bring patients without any knowledge of basic research into that situation where they really feel, I don't have anything to contribute. And even if that is not supported by a researcher who is really inviting and involving a patient, as Judith had told me, without creating this welcoming atmosphere, which is more than really saying we are very happy that you have come to this meeting and we are really looking forward to your contribution. I mean, that's it needs much more. Yeah. I don't know whether that is an answer to your question, but I think you might be a little bit more selective and considerate of the patients and really the patient research partners overall are higher educated, which doesn't have a problem as long as you are aware that not all representativity has to come from that person. But to make it a successful relationship, you need people that are able to communicate with professionals. So they need to be a little bit confident and knowledgeable, but never without thinking that the patient perspective is broader. And there are also other ways of exploring the opinions of patients through surveys or other qualitative research methods.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Maybe someone wants to share their own patient and public involvement. I know Alison already shared in a video, so please have a look at the video if you've not already done that. And otherwise, we have the email addresses of Maarten and Judith, so we probably can email them with any question. And then thank you so much for doing this for us, Judith and Maarten. If I were in the room, yes, then I would applaud now, yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, I will stop the...